Oh, people, we are back. The weekly show is back. Jimmy's pretending like he's stuck in one spot, but he can't, he's too old. He can't sit there without blinking. So all of a sudden it doesn't matter because he can't even do it. That's awesome. The poor little lamb. Poor little lamb can't even make fun. It's so fun. So Jimmy, it's an exciting day today. I'm excited to be back. I'm coming to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We went to a basketball game last night and we're going to a couple basketball games today. My son Kale is in the room. He's probably awake right now. Get up. You got to do something now, man. Let's go. Earn your keep, right? And we're going to talk about leadership today, but I need to tell you a story because I don't know if you can see. I poked my eye yesterday, popped a blood vessel of some kind. It's not a great look for me. Not a great look, but I hit myself in the eye with a hanger. We can talk about that story later. I don't know how it happened. It just kind of happened. All right. So okay, so something happened to me yesterday, and I can we talk? Can we do it? Can we have? Is this a bathroom story? Is that going to be okay? Are we going to get canceled for that? I forget. I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm in a bathroom. Jimmy, you're not going to believe this. It's true, 100% true. So I'm in the bathroom yesterday, right? And it was like I walked into the bathroom, and it was there was a long line of stalls, right? And so I'm going over to a stall because you got to go to a stall, and there's a guy. And I go to the stall, and then there's this guy that comes in after me and picks the stall like not like right next to me, like right next to me, which you don't do. You would never do. There are two rules for guys in bathrooms. One, you never pick the stall next to the person that's there. That's the first one. And the second one is never wear open-toed shoes. Those are the two rules. But this guy picks this stall right next to me, right? And all of a sudden, I'm just sitting there, and all I hear him saying was, you can do it. You can do it. You're like, it's going to be great. You're going to be great. You just got to go get it. You got to go get it. And I kind of looked at him and nothing. Like, I'm just looking at him and he's kept talking. He's like, this is your time. You're going to do it. I know you're going to be fantastic. I know you are. I believe in you. And I'm like, is he is he really getting himself? I mean, I wanted to start cheering for him. I didn't know if he needed some help to get going or anything like that. I'm like, what's going on? Right. So it was really weird for like the whole time. And then we got up, we're going over to wash our hands and stuff like that. And he turns around. And when he turns around, he's got one earbud in. He didn't have the other earbud in. He had one. So he was talking to somebody else. I was ready for to cheer the guy on and help him out. I thought he was struggling to get things done. But no, he just earbud on the other end. I walked out. I laughed so hard I couldn't talk to him. I'm like, I'm not gonna. I couldn't tell him the story, so I just told it to all seven people who will watch this. But still, I couldn't tell it to him because I thought that's a weird thing to do. And I don't strike up conversations in the bathroom. That's just not what I do. But I figured if I was ever going to strike up a conversation, this was going to be the one that I strike up. I still didn't. I just thought he was encouraging himself to get some stuff done when in fact he was just talking to somebody on the phone and I didn't know it. Why do you only wear one earbud, Jimmy? What is that all about? Why do people do that? I don't understand that. They give you two. They give you two. Why would you only you want to hear the airport? What is that? That's not like that's not there are settings on those things too, Jimmy. Like I don't understand why you would just have one in. It's the dumbest thing ever. So that's why I thought this guy doesn't have any earbuds in because why would you only have one earbud? That's so stupid. It's ridiculous. So I blame it on that guy. It's his fault, not my fault, his fault. I was there to encourage people. I'm just trying to lead, just trying to help out the best I can. All I want to do is help this guy out. And he couldn't even help it out because he was sitting there with one earbud instead of two. That's my story, Jimmy.
First of all, we start off with the Darth Vader story. You got one red eyeball. That's interesting. Okay.
I do.
I poked myself with a coat hanger.
Listen, Jimmy. Okay. Nobody asked, Jimmy. You just hold on a second. It was dark in the room yesterday because Kale was in the room because I didn't want to wake him up. I was going to speak in Madison. It was awesome to be able to speak in Wisconsin again for the Associate Principals Conference. So I was getting ready and I was walking into the bathroom. Next thing I know, I just kind of pulled the hanger. Thing hit me right in the eye. Look, you can see it. Hey, hang on. This way? I don't know. This way? I don't remember. Whatever it is. You'll see it at some point. But how about that?
No pun intended. No pun intended, but it was Darth in the room. I like that. That was good. Don't even know if you recognize that.
What? No, it wasn't.
I love your analysis of you don't get up next to someone, you don't take the stall next to somebody, and you don't wear open-toed shoes. Good.
Those are the easiest rules in the history of bathrooms. Nope. If you screw, I'm just going to tell you, if you don't take anything else from us ever in the history of leadership and conversation, take those two things. Do not go next to somebody if there's an open stall. Nobody does that. And there's no reason to wear open-toed shoes in that place. You don't know. Oh, and here's the other thing, Jimmy. Here's the other thing that you need to know about me. I will tell you, like I'm when it comes down to bathrooms, like public bathrooms, I'm all about Seinfeld on this one, man. If my shoelaces touch the ground, I'm throwing them out. And I'm not just throwing out the shoelaces, Jimmy. The whole shoe's going. I don't need that. What if they touched, Jimmy? What if they touched, Jimmy? I can't have that. I'll throw the whole shoe out. I will. I promise you I will. I promise you I will throw the whole shoe out. You can't, so make sure that if you have your shoes, you have to have shoes on, but make sure that they're tied. Because if the laces hit the ground in the public bathroom, Jimmy, you toss those shoes as soon as you possibly can. You run right to the shoe store, you get a new pair, and then you throw them out.
All right, folks, we got Howie Mandel, the germaphobe, on here this morning on the show this morning.
Listen,
and, Joe, I'm going to change this topic before you go down a path that we do not want to go down. We need to get out of the bathroom talk now. Right now, let's get out of the bathroom talk and let's shift gears. Okay, my friend, can we do that?
I'm ready, man.
I'm a little worried. I mean, I'd rather talk about the 1 year, bud, because you know what I was thinking? When was the last time you went to school, dude? That's all the kids do in schools today. 1 year, bud. It's called style. It's called the style. It's what young people do. But now old people want to be like young people. But
also, Joe, true. Is that why your hat is backward?
Exactly. I'm trying to be young. I look younger, don't I? Look, watch what happens. No. I look 60.
Yep.
I look 35.
Or 4. Or 4. You look 4. You look like Mama Costas put a hat on you just to make sure you didn't sunburn yourself on the way to the park. All right, let's be honest about what's going on here. Let's get to the guest, Jimmy.
David James has it. David James said it. Bathroom Leadership by Joe Sanfilippo. That's what we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about. Next one. And Neil says this podcast is probably the most comprehensive podcast on leadership today, my friends. That's what it's called. Bathroom etiquette today. Bathroom etiquette. My son is on here. I hope he muted you during that whole conversation. He doesn't need to listen to that nonsense. Cardi's asking about your thoughts on Adrian Griffin. Well, we know that because Doc Rivers today is going to be the man. And Joe is going to the Marquette game today and the Bucks game tonight, right, Joe? That's what's happening.
Absolutely.
Right? Josh Tovar says, Jimmy, we need another podcast. So, Josh, just for you, episode 42 coming out tomorrow, buddy. Just for you. All right.
Ooh,
Joe, what are we doing today?
I don't know. I love your. Are you talking about the Interview Chair podcast?
Oh my!
Is that what's coming out tomorrow?
I don't even know. Here it goes. I'm doing one on the bathroom episode. It's called the Bathroom Podcast now.
That's not true.
Joe, I got the hat on backwards. I got my Kool-Aid this morning. I'm feeling good.
What is that? Is that water Kool-Aid in a mason jar? Why are you drinking? Is that moonshine? Why are you drinking moonshine at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning?
Joe, I only drink out of mason jars.
Mason jars?
Yeah. You know what? You want to know the story real quick? Reader's Digest for anybody who cares?
Yeah.
Here's why.
Yeah.
Every time I pull this glass out, by the way, I have a whole bunch of them in my cupboard. I only drink out of mason jars for the most part. Everyone else is an exception. For the most part, I drink out of mason jars. But here's why. Because this reminds me of my mama.
Okay, all right. See, I can't.
The story, Joe, is that my mom and I, when we were young, my mom would make hot sauce, and we would jar it in mason jars, and we would store them, and we'd give them out as gifts. So, see, you have to understand the story, buddy. Mason jars.
Listen, there's always a story about it. That's fantastic, and I can't even make fun of you for that. So you see, this is what you do. This is what you do.
If you did, I would have shared the episode with my mom, and you no longer be invited over to the house.
You're not proud. Whatever. You're not proud enough for this episode to go share with your mother. I'm no dummy. I know what's going on around here. Let's be honest. But seriously, I am jacked up today. I can't wait. We got a guest. On a Wisconsin guest. I mean, seriously, we're Wisconsin taking over the world. Which way am I going? This way, people. Sarah Johnson coming in hot from northern Wisconsin, the greater Shell Lake area. Is that correct? Are you Southside Shell Lake?
Are
you Southside or Northside Shell Lake? Are you Southside?
You've
Southside?
You know exactly where I live.
No, I don't.
It's on the other side of the fish.
You live by the school. You live by the school.
Okay,
right?
First of all, Joe, safety tips. You wear one earbud because you need to know. You need to know if someone's coming up behind you, and then you never share where you live on a public forum. Joe Sanfilippo, what the heck,
Sarah? You really think people are watching this? You really think people are watching this?
You and I are going to have some safety tip conversations, Joe.
I'm loving a Kurt Reese comment right now. Look at Kurt Reese's comment, Joe.
Oh man,
Kurt Reese in the house.
Hey, I'll tell you. So you're not supposed to tell people where you live? Like, I do a video every weekend from where I live to the school. Like, you don't think people know where I live, Sarah Johnson?
That's your privilege, Joe Sanfilippo. That's your privilege.
Unbelievable.
That's privilege. You're a white male. You don't understand, Joe. Females can't be giving out their addresses. Come on.
What does that even say? What does that say? Follow the sun? Who? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
There's no Jay Casas and Associates under it on this one.
Really? That's right. Well, I'm not part of the club. I need to be part of that club, that Jay Casas club. I do. I wish I had my Merchant of Nope shirt on. That's part of the club. I need one of those. Everybody needs a Merchant of Nope. Do you think we could get a Merchant of Nope, Jay Casas and Associates sweatshirt for everybody, or a visor or something like that? Like, I'm really into something. We got to get something going on. Or maybe like you give them a charger or something like that. I don't know what you give out.
I want the record of Joe Sarah Johnson that Joe Sanfilippo has been talking for 12 minutes now.
I know. I've been listening. I almost fell asleep.
Oh, boy.
Hey, Joe, it's going to be one earbud. That's the Merchant of Nope. That's right.
That's exactly what it is. I totally understand that you wear it, but every one of those earbuds has like a setting on it where you can hear everything around you. So please don't even talk to me about, well, you got to make sure that you hear your surroundings. There's a setting on it, for goodness sakes. Like, you can do it from your phone. My goodness, this is not going well for me. And you know what I just realized? I'm not getting out of this thing alive, because we got two Jay Casas and Associates employees to get on this thing, and here I sit like the Lone Ranger off to the side. Anything Sarah says, Jimmy's gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, that's the greatest thing I ever heard." Anything Jimmy says, like, "Oh, I gotta make sure that I cash my check, so I'll make sure that he's okay too." All of this is going to happen, and I'm just gonna sit here going, "Yep. Nope. Yep. Niner. Don't pick the person next to you in the stall, next to you in the bathroom. Go." This is you know what? That was my day. I may have gotten 12 minutes up, but I'm not going to be able to talk the rest of the time. So I may as well say something. It's the way that it works. Are we done now? Can we talk about some like leadership?
Why don't you introduce Sarah, Joe? You introduce Sarah. Because today you guys are, kind of
we're pretty close in terms of
neighbors.
We're neighbors. Like, she's south side of town. I understand. Like, that's a tough side of town. It's the tough side of town. Like the country club on that side of town doesn't have horses. So here's the thing that we need to understand. We're like Sarah Johnson, Wisconsin educator extraordinaire. She's the only one that's working in a school, Jimmy. So,
I'm not anymore. What? Have you not caught up?
I don't. I'm sure you probably told me. So, but a wonderful leader, and more importantly, an incredible person. So we're very happy to have Sarah on the show today. And the best part is, like, she's not going to back down. Like, you saw it. Like, she'll yell at me in a heartbeat. Won't even think about it. She won't yell at Jimmy because associate time or whatever it is. So I mean, you got to make sure they ride for the brand. You know what I mean? So here we go. We can talk about leadership. So, Sarah, we're happy to have
next
you.
Week, I won't even invite Joe. It'll just be me and you. How's that?
That sounds good. I will make space for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, of course you will. Well, neither of you have jobs, I guess. So there it is. You got plenty of time. Here we go. So one of the things that I think, we started to talk about, in all seriousness, when it came down to the bathroom conversation that we had earlier, was, I think I made a perception. I had this perception that this guy was talking but he wasn't talking. So at the same time, I made an assumption in that situation. And I think one of the things that happens a lot with leadership is people assume based on maybe one interaction or half an interaction about that they know about all the things that are going on. And I think when that assumption drives other people's perception of who you are as an individual, it becomes really hard for leaders to continue to grow because they keep thinking about what's going on all around them and what people are thinking about. And one of the things that I love about what you do, Sarah, is really thinking about what can we do to take care of each other as leaders in these spaces, and from finding balance to leading with faith, everything that you can do to create opportunities to make sure that you come back the next day feeling good about the leadership that you provide is really important. But we don't see that. And I think as you think about what you do and how you coach when you coach leaders, is that kind of what you see from people when you're out there, or am I completely off because I don't work in a school anymore?
First of all, I'm stunned because I don't know if I've ever received any type of complimentary interaction from you before, Joe. So I just needed to take a minute.
That's not true at all. That's not true at all. I'm sure there was the one time. I think you actually documented it. I'll find it on Twitter.
No, you will.
Because you like screenshot said, you've done this like 9 times. You've done it 9 times. Like, I've never received a compliment, but you've done it 9 times, 9 compliments. So let's just relax a little bit there.
8.5. 8. Whatever. I actually don't even know what your question was, except to say that, the work for leaders is hard. I was thinking this morning about that, what you talked about with perceptions and how sometimes, we can have an interaction that just completely puts us in a deficit with the people we work with. And a huge part of what I'm focusing in now is resiliency and studying that. And how do we be resilient as leaders so we can keep leading people in our organizations. And in terms of so to clear the air, I am not currently in a school. I was for the previous 2 years, library media specialist, but I do go in and principal sub in this school.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Principal sub, and I sub in the library too. No, you're not. Come on. Hey, I'm going to float that. I'm going to call Fall Creek and just say, hey, you want to call him in every now and then? It's kind of
Sarah, don't tell him where I live. Why would you tell him where I live? I can't believe you would tell people where I live. I can't believe you would say that. My God,
you didn't know that principal subs exist. That's because nobody, I'm not going to, I almost did, but I almost went low. I'm going to stay high.
It is clear that Joe has had at least 3 Red Bulls this morning. At least.
Okay.
At least. You can drink water to flush it out.
Oh, okay. Whatever.
So you need something. You got to calm. You need a calming gummy.
Whatever. I don't do that. I don't do calm. So I totally agree. When you're in spaces like with this perception kind of drives not only your happiness, but what all of your interactions look like. And so when you're coaching and you're in these spots and you see these people that almost look like, well, Jimmy calls it, when you're living on the perimeter and you're seeing all this stuff come out, I think it impacts the way that you interact. And so how do you get people back to where their core values are when they're hearing all this noise outside of these spaces?
So that's the beautiful part about coaching, and why I love that we get to do that is we do have those conversations, like basically bring it back to behavior. What is the function of that behavior? And have those, that's the best part is so let's give an example. Leaders get perception data survey results, anonymous surveys. And how many times have we seen that where they sit there and try to figure out who was the wolf in sheep's clothing that has said this absolutely terrible, gutting personal attack thing in the comments, right? That I can't respond to, that I can't really do anything with as a leader because all it was a personal attack. But I've seen them, and I've done this, internalized it in such a way that has me maybe interacting differently, or at least having a monologue inside my head about what these people are thinking of me, right? But how do you coach people through that is just to help them build their resiliency, help them to use Brene Brown's work, help them put out the story that they're telling themselves. What am I telling myself about this interaction or this perception, right? And just help them build their resiliency back by encouraging one-to-one, transparent, face-to-face interactions. How do we get back to some authenticity to remember that there's a function behind every behavior? We can acknowledge that as kids. Like we can say, oh, kids behave this way because XYZ. But as leaders, I think a lot of times we forget that adults also have a function behind their behavior. And so even if it was an interaction that we had in person, it wasn't a perception survey result, we got to figure that out. Like, what was it in that person's life that made them X, Y, or Z? And then just try to get back to authentic interactions that are connected and based on human connection in the heart, really. I thought, when I was coming on today, Jimmy and I were talking recently about this idea of burnout. And it got me thinking this morning about how hard that really is. As a leader, first of all, let's separate the fact that leaders are getting burned out. Let's talk about trying to lead in an organization where you have people burnt out. Those conversations are so hard because if you have people that are legit in that burnout space, which is a complex syndrome, their spirit's gone. And so you have people functioning and acting in ways that they're not proud of 5 years from now when they come out of it and get into a healthy space. We still got to lead them because we need them to be good for kids. Right. And so I guess my big point right today and what I'm studying and what I'm trying to look at inside of the balance work and the faith work is also this idea of resiliency. And how do we build resiliency in our leaders and in our teachers to help them overcome the systemic issues that are making them act in ways that they would not feel proud about if they sat back and thought about it. Does that circle us into where do we land a plane?
No, I absolutely. I don't think so, because I think it's a good conversation to have. And I think when Jimmy, I want you to talk, Jimmy, I want you to kind of hit on how we get people to that core value piece of it, because a lot of the times, even I have like the whole imposter syndrome of what is going on. And the idea that, I've spent 26 years in the educational in a building, but I've been out for literally 6 months and I'm thinking, my gosh, have I lost touch, or are people going to think that I've lost touch of reality? That's something that I have to kind of get past, and I have a really hard time getting past it. Let's just be completely honest about it. And I think if I keep coming back to what my core values are and what I hope to help people with, it makes you feel better, but it doesn't take it away. So Jimmy, how do you help the people? Like I said, I'll make fun of Jimmy every day of my life, but I love what he does, not only with leaders, but with you, with Sarah, and with your whole group, because he's leading a group of leaders who's now leading a group of leaders. So when you, Jimmy, are talking to your group, what are the biggest things that you have to impart upon them when it comes down to how do you not only build resiliency in others, but build that resiliency in yourself? What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm just kind of listening here. Thank you, Sarah, for those, and Joe, and just kind of trying to process. I actually just wrote down a few notes because just like anything else, right? I always start with just trying to process it and then kind of frame it up in my head. And I think it's really important. The reason that's important for all of us in a leadership position, Joe, and we talk about this all the time, is because first of all, I think we just got to slow down. I think that's part of the issue. We move very quickly. We've got a bazillion things going on. We've got many decisions to make. We feel responsible. We feel like we're servant leaders. We feel like we have to fix all the problems. It just comes at us so quickly. The pacing of the job is probably the thing that is the most exhausting more than anything else. I mean, obviously there's the mental stress, there's the emotional stress, the emotional toll this job can take on us. But I think the biggest thing is I would encourage all of our leaders and teachers, or whatever our role is number one, even as a parent, right? Just slow down a little bit. Try to kind of process the information as it's coming at us, and then take it from a point of curiosity. And the reason that is important is because this idea of behavior, right, are basically, in my opinion, is just based on experiences that people have had. And I think, again, when we look at the foundation of healthy cultures, it's the ability to begin to understand the behavior. So when we slow down, we can approach it from a point of curiosity and ask ourselves, why? Why is that student put his head on the desk? Why is the student not doing their work? Why is that teacher yelling at that child? Why is that colleague talking negatively about another colleague? There are reasons for that, right? And again, I'm not saying I'm right, but I do believe a lot of our work in leadership starts from a very clear mindset, because it flushes it out for us. Again, because it'll just build up. You whether it's the noise or whatever it is, it's building up. And then what happens in my experience is when we begin to have these experiences, we're vulnerable. And we're vulnerable in the sense that we can become very critical, very judgmental. And I think that's just dangerous, right? And so when we look at behaviors in organizations, I think all of us, whether we're coaching, whether we're teaching, whether we're leading, whether we're managing, whatever the role we're playing at that moment, it's really important to slow down and try to see it from a different perspective, which means we have to reshape it very quickly, reframe our thoughts to see it through a different lens. And then I think that's where we have the ability as leaders to understand that's why relationships are so important. But there's also a mindset to it. And that mindset is to truly believe that whether it's a student, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a para, secretary, counselor, leader, whatever, that we do have to believe that these individuals want to be great at what they do. They want to make an impact. No one goes into this profession not wanting to, but it is very easy for us to lose our way, and we lose our way because of these experiences. You know, Sarah just mentioned one example. The feedback sometimes we get, we can be super hypercritical of our colleagues, of our organization, of our supervisors, of our students. And I think sometimes we just forget what it's like. And so, you know, how are we being intentional and understanding those relationships, or building those relationships in order to build that trust so people are willing to share those experiences? Because I believe it is those experiences that land people where they land. And when we're not willing to invest time to understand those experiences, that's where I think we begin to devalue people. We're basically saying, we don't care, just do your job. We don't care, sit down. We don't care, come to class on time. And so there's just a lot there to unpack, but you know, that clarity is critical. Frameworks bring a lot of clarity, and that clarity is around expectations, and the expectations, how are we going to behave in the organization? That's why core values are so critical, because the truth of the matter is we have to have some framework to which to operate from. In other words, who do we want to be? How are we going to behave? And more importantly, why do people behave the way they behave? And we're all susceptible to violating the core values. So how are we going to respond when one of us violates it? I'm going to violate it. You're going to violate it. Sarah's going to violate it. People, we're human. We're not perfect beings. We have feelings. We get our feelings hurt. Sometimes we overreact. Sometimes we're exhausted. And so we really just need to slow down and try to process that. And I just think we'll get better results if we do that. We can't fix all these issues, but I do think we can certainly bring a better version of ourselves to the situations. So those are a couple thoughts that are on my mind.
So Winston had mentioned that there's always a story behind the action, and he's absolutely right. And I think the one thing that we have to understand is just saying that to ourselves before we take action and something that we can control gives us a better opportunity. I think gives us a better result almost every time, right? And I think the idea is you don't always have to know the story. I think you just have to understand that there is one. Correct. And if you just start there and assume the best intentions, like you mentioned, then I think it changes the way that we operate. And so, Sarah, what does that look like for you when you're coaching and helping people to work through that? Because it's really hard to get it's really easy to get your feelings hurt when you're leading a building that's trying to grow people at the same time. You know, you're still the leader of that space. And I think there's some responsibility that comes on with the perception. So what do you do to help leaders in that regard?
First observation that's really interesting is that, you know, we do know that you should operate from a core set of values. And a lot of times we'll have those set in our organizations, but most people, unless they were a part of building those, don't have those necessarily internalized. So a big amount of work that we do Jay Casas and Associates is helping organizations review those, update those, whatever that happens to be. From the individual leadership perspective, I think we might be surprised by how few people actually define their core values. It's a workshop that I've offered multiple times. And then inside of our coaching, we've started developing that with great intention. So, and as Jimmy calls it, then they develop their leadership language. And so we work on developing those core values. And I go about that personally using what Brené Brown's published in Dare to Lead. And we isolate it down to 2 to 3 core values. And it's a really cool exercise. It challenges leaders to really kind of isolate what they're really about, because we could be about everything. But, you know, it doesn't make us, it doesn't give us a pathway back to our core if we don't define what those core are, right? So first, it's helping leaders define their core values, and then helping them define the behaviors that are aligned with those values. What are they doing to actually demonstrate? For example, if we just take kindness, it's a big one, right? What does kindness look like in your daily life? What behaviors show kindness? And then you got to define which behaviors you inevitably do that don't show kindness. What are they that are the opposite? And so those are called slippery slope behaviors, right? So you define those. And then I would say even further, then we go to the next step, which is taking those core values and those behaviors, because kindness is going to look different to Joe than it does to me than it does to Jimmy. And you take those behaviors that you define and you put that into a mission, and you create a daily living mission statement. Essentially, this is who I'm going to be when I come to school every day. This is, as a leader, this is who I'm going to be, and that's how I'm going to show up. And then those values, you use the action words to put into the mission, which then you define your vision. What do you want to be eventually as this incredible leader? Like, you're going to show up every day as your mission, but where are you going to get to the values? That's what I do. We define that with the clients, and then they can always go back to that. One of the best examples that I had, Jimmy, and I haven't even shared this with you, but one of our clients this year asked me to do that workshop with her and her associate principal. And we just met again, and she said, you know what? I got to tell you, this has been, it's life-changing for us, because we never sit down together and actually share that with one another. So now I know what he's all about. He knows what I'm all about. And we have built trust to the point where now he feels valued because I had you sit down and pour that in, and then we learned about each other. And so now, I mean, here they were like coexisting for months, trying to manage the student discipline and, you know, lead together and try to do this common thing. But truly there was friction between the two until they finally sat down and learned one another's stories. Why do you operate from that core set of values? And what behaviors can I help you, you know, walk through every day? And how can I call you out in a way that is caring and loving to you so that we can do our work together better? And that's the kind of stuff we can do. And that's the kind of stuff that we do as leaders, is just really trying to help them to trust one another and realize that there are different lenses that we operate from, but we can still be working toward the same common organizational goals. We're just going to bring our individual strengths and passions and talents to it. And we have to honor that in one another. So anyway, long story short, first of all, we got to develop the values and define what they look like in operational days so that we can go back to it and reflect upon it. And then we do.
So I think one question I get a lot, and Joe, you and I were somewhere and this happens, is that one of the things we talk about is certainly the organizations or the schools within we work in are going to have its core values. But I think what we talk about is, what are your individual core values, right? Typically, those are going to align with your organizations. They're not going to go contra.
Right.
But this is a behavior framework for ourselves, right? And so the idea is to say, what are our behaviors, what are our values, and how we're going to behave, and more importantly, how are we communicating those, and how are we living those? Because again, we don't want it just to be words about words. It's, hey, these are the values, but then to ask people permission, or quite frankly, give them permission. If we can identify, this is the type of leader I want to be, then we have to recognize that we're going to need help from our people in our organization to be that leader. That teacher has to say to their students in their classroom, this is the teacher I want to be for you, because they're going to need the help of the students to be that teacher. And when we can build a culture where everybody's responsible for the culture and climate, because we give people permission to help us be who we want to be, because none of us can do this by ourselves, just because of the complexities of the work that we do. We're dealing with variables that are unpredictable every day. And so we have to begin to understand and work in a different capacity of that. And some of that is just getting back to fundamentals. So here is just something for our listeners today to kind of reflect on. You can kind of just test it yourself. On Monday, if you have an assistant principal, some don't. So if you don't, then maybe go to your secretary or go to a lead counselor, a lead teacher, or instructional coach, or even your building leadership team and say, hey, I was just reflecting this weekend on something. And let me ask you a question. I want to ask you this. What do you think my vision is for this school? And when we learn that, is that most people do not know, first of all, what their own vision is. They can't articulate it like almost like an elevator speech. You should just be able to share what it is. But then more importantly, other people can't share that. And so the question from a leadership perspective is, if we lack clarity in articulating our vision to others, and our job is to lead others towards a vision, well, then how do we go from point A to point B when nobody knows what the vision is? Right. And that's what I see. And it seems so fundamental, basic, but it is basic, but it's exactly what we say, is because we assume that, oh, that's just, I don't want to take time. But it is the most important thing. It is the foundation of everything we do. The fundamentals are critical. And even after COVID, when people would reach out to us, Joe, how many times did we say to people, just go back to your fundamentals, people?
Yeah.
Go back to the basics. For those people who have coached ever like athletics, right? If you play a crappy game on Friday night that is frustrating you and you're watching it and you keep looking at your assistant coach, your players and like, guys, we got to rebound. We got to box out. We got to take care of the ball. Quit turning it over. Those are all fundamentals. So on Monday morning, when we come back to practice, we don't say to the kids, okay, let's just scrimmage again. We'll get better if we just scrimmage. Nope. What do? We go back to the fundamentals because it's the fundamentals that are keeping us from achieving our goal. And this goal would be to, compete at a high level or win the game or whatever. And so there are a lot of analogies and parallels that we can make, but it is to me the fundamentals where we just have to go back to those basics.
So one of the things that I think people talk about, or when I talk to groups that I talk about a lot, is when it comes down to where you're leading, how you're leading, and what the vision and mission of what you do is simply this: less words, honestly, turn into more actions. So if you're like, let's think about less words, more action. When you talk about simple, unique, and repeatable, when it comes down to, from a brand promise to a vision. If people can repeat what you look at vision statements and mission statements on walls all the time, and they are paragraphs long because they look good on a background or whatever the case may be. But if we can put ourselves in a situation where everybody not only knows it, but knows how to live it, less words equal more action when it comes down to what that looks like. So, and it's the same thing with your individual vision. If people know who you are from your core, like right away when they see you and how you act in that moment, then they're going to feel better about coming to you with stuff because they know how you're going to react, because they know who you are in that space, right? So it's really important not only to be able to have what that looks like in terms of your core values, but be able to articulate it in a way that allows other people to see you for who you are and who you want to be.
Sarah, you had shared something with me last week that I want you to touch on with our audience today, and that is this. When we talk about resiliency, and you had mentioned to me, Jimmy, and I kind of figured some things out on my own because I was so focused on burnout, but maybe it really isn't burnout. Maybe it's something else. And again, everybody's going to have different thoughts and opinions based on their own experiences. And, we all know right now more than ever, teachers are tired. They're burned out. We'll use that term for right now. But you had mentioned something to me that I really love, because you and I have talked this topic about systemic trauma or systemic burnout, that these are systemic issues, right? More than maybe individual issues sometimes. And so, but one of the things you said to me that I love, that I want you to just talk a little bit about, is this idea of spiritual self-care. What does that mean to you? Define that for our listeners. What does that mean? And because we also know, we heard the word spirit, like, oh, Christian, right? And so, talk a little bit about that spiritual self-care and the fact that, many of our leaders are Christian, right? They have that spirit in terms of, they look at that devotional or whatever and that scripture to get us through the day. And that's, whatever we need to get us through. But there's also this other component of spirituality. And I want you to talk a little bit about that.
So I'm going to try really hard not to geek out like Joe and take 12 minutes of this conversation, but with something with substance, that's the difference. Okay. Couple things.
She's tougher than you think she is.
I've got the zingers.
Grounded in kindness. Here we go. You talked about Brene Brown 3 times, and then you throw shade. Way to go, Sarah.
Back, because humor is a characteristic that we all value here. So we got this. So and I love you, Joe.
It's like, just go talk about your spirituality.
All right, let's talk about it. So here's the deal. A couple of things. Core values. This all ties through really well. So I wanted to mention it. So I almost feel foolish in some ways, where it's like, you kind of come to a point in life where you look back and you're like, oh, that's why, this happened or this occurred. And you only gain that through wisdom and experience. But the deal is that I set my core values because I made time to slow down. Jimmy's talking about how so fast we are. Joe, I texted you probably before you two knew that I was leaving my principal job, before the world did, like the masses, before I even announced it. I made a decision to leave my principal position. It was definitely a spiritually driven decision, but here's the deal. I finally slowed down after my tenure as a high school principal enough to really set my core values. And here we are 6 years later. My core values are balance, resilience, and faith. I have written 2 books on balance and faith. And the funny part is resilience is really the space that I'm in right now. I'm working on my dissertation. So I kind of wanted to couch that a little bit for Jimmy's and my conversation, because I messaged him because I was so excited. I've been trying to examine and research deeply this idea of how a leader's spiritual practices or their disciplines or their orientation toward focusing on their spiritual centering can help mitigate burnout. And I would toss the term burnout, I have for years, as if I really knew what that was. And I know those of you that, you do research and you study, you start to realize that you actually know less about a topic than you thought you knew. Like you thought you were an expert, and all of a sudden there's hundreds of studies that are like go way deeper, right? So anyway, this concept of burnout, I want to give you the definition. 1986 was the first like major foundational study for burnout. And it matters. It's gonna tie through to the spiritual piece in just a moment. But the definition for burnout in 1986, these were some foundational studies. Maslach is the person here, and they say that burnout has been identified as a complex psychological syndrome comprised of 3 dimensions: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. That was in 86. In 97, 11 years later, they further refined the concept by saying it's an index of the dislocation between what people are and what they have to do. It represents an erosion of values, dignity, spirit, and will. An erosion of the human soul. It is a malady that spreads gradually and continuously over the time, putting people in a downward spiral from which it is hard to recover. I wanted to share that definition because for me, it was like, okay, that's bigger than I can accomplish here. But the words that we're weaving through were exhaustion, depersonalization, a lack of sense of worth. And so when we're talking about trying to lead people in organizations, in school, in education, where burnout really is prevalent, in the real issues that a person faces come from their human spirit. Like that's a big deal, you guys. That is not just, let's get together and have a 1-hour session on mindfulness.
Right. No, I agree.
You can't solve it in 1 hour. No. And so I started to have this like existential crisis because I was like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing for 6 years to serve leaders, trying to help them? When in reality, it's hard to recover. They said it's a downward spiral and it happens over time. And I also know that it comes in cycles. And I know that we've all had it, whether you want to admit it here live or not. We have all experienced some level of that downward spiral. 100%. I believe that the 3 of us have never gotten to the rock bottom where you can't come back. And why is that? So then like the questions is why not? And my answer to that is resiliency. And so the American Psychological Association defines resiliency basically as the ability to bounce back. And it incorporates what you think about resiliency. So it's that whole, like, we want to throw out growth mindset right here. Like, do you believe that you can bounce back? And if you believe you can bounce back, you will. They've found, lots of studies have shown that you have to believe that you can. And they also have said that it can be cultivated. And so I'm finally going to tie it back to spiritual practices. Okay. For me, when I look at the definition of burnout and I see that it's a spiritual malady, it hurts me because I've experienced this and I've watched it happen to really incredible educators, even in the last 2 years when I was back in the school system, watching people just decimate. But the hope, and this is where I'm doing my research because I need to align with hope and not the reality of the burnout. We need to acknowledge the reality. And then we need to have unwavering hope that we will get through it. And that is the Stockdale principle. It's prisoner of war. It's Jim Collins' Good to Great. All of these really important pieces, right? But we talk about the spiritual element. And so what I'm studying and what I'm learning is that we all, and we know this, have a domain of our spirit inside of us. And so Jimmy had started out saying, well, is this for Christians? How does this look? And for me, in my research, I was starting to get tangled up in people's perception of spirituality and religiosity. And so where I'm at right now is I love this idea that there's an emotional and a physical and a spiritual domain. There's more than domains, but we know that there is really established models that focus on people's spiritual self-care. And it's honestly, in the clinical settings, it's there. People in professions that have been serving with high capacity for vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue, specifically nursing industry, they are all talking about and promoting spiritual self-care and focusing on spiritual wellness. And for probably 1,000 reasons, we don't do that in the school setting. And so for what I'm studying, what I'm looking at is, how do we as individuals, there's a human spirit that we all have. It could be tied to your, Christianity or to your devotional practices. It could be to a more Eastern form of, if you want to tie religion into it, meditation, all of this. But at the end of the day, it's how we connect back to ourselves and therefore can better connect to others. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's a domain that we need to start pouring more of ourselves into, our energies into, helping the people in our organizations lead without the heaviness of religious and judgment and the shame and everything that comes from that, but helping people get back to who they are in their human spirit. And that is really another domain of resiliency, and it can be grown. And that is the hope. That, to me, that's the through line into helping our people get through this spiritual malady of burnout. And you've seen it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you go. And I think what you've made like 1,000 great points there, and they all come back to, how are we making sure that people can develop a process that gives them self-worth, that understands that what they do has value, and then helping them help others see that as well. And if we can grow it that way, I think we find ourselves in a much better situation. I think the question becomes how, right? And I think, would you say, Sarah, at this point that it's not impossible, but really difficult to help them with that how piece of it if they haven't realized that it's an issue and that they haven't identified it as this is a resiliency issue for me, right? Or if they just push it as like, no, I just need a little bit more time. Like, I can do it. It's fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But I just need a little bit more time, or I need a little bit more of this or that. Do people have to really just kind of identify, like, before they hit the spiral? How do you help people identify before they hit the spiral? That's hard.
Well, why do you think I was having my existential crisis? Because here I am, like, I'm watching people around me, and people I love deeply. People, we would all recognize them, our clients, all these. And I started to feel like, whoa, this isn't me. I feel like I'm looking at people going, you don't even know you're experiencing this. You don't even know. Right. Like, you're not even willing to acknowledge that this is happening, right? So the question is how. And then I look at a framework like Brene Brown has, which is in Rising Strong. It is the rumble, the reckoning, and the revolution. People need to get to the rumble. They need to rumble with this feeling, like this disconnect, this depersonalization that they're having. So going back to what are the characteristics and behaviors of burnout? It is, all of a sudden, we don't care anymore whether that kid fails or not. All of a sudden, we don't care whether or not our colleague is showing up on time to meetings or is engaged or whatever that happens to be. Or, well, let them leave. How many leaders have gotten to that point where you're like, well, they want to leave, let them leave, or, they don't belong teaching, or, all these things that we get to because we're depersonalizing it, because we're experiencing that sense of disconnect, right? So anyway, but a huge part of that is, how do we stimulate that in people? And that is the hard part, right? Because it's personal. It is so personal. But we got to get back to personalizing it. I saw in the comments here, like, when we start to lose our love for what we're doing, right? Anyway, it's back to that. And it is hard because people need to be able to rumble with what's going on. Why are they feeling this way? They need to recognize it. And then that next step is the recognition. Okay, what is my part in this? What can I control? What, beyond the systems that are burdening us, that are causing these burnout elements, what control do I have? And that's that resiliency piece. And then the revolution, that's when it comes, and it is brilliant and beautiful, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Sarah, that was beautiful. My friend.
Really well done. Yeah, absolutely. Very well done. Very well done.
I took a bunch of notes here for myself too. So thank you for making me pause and reflect again this morning. And, one takeaway I'm thinking of again right now, and I think this is one thing we all try to share with the people that we work with, is what is within your domain of what you can control.
Mm-hmm.
And, Joe mentioned earlier again, one of the biggest growth for ourselves, I believe, is to stay off the perimeter, because when we go to the perimeter, I believe we're not growing, right? We're stagnant there because you can't grow. You can't identify your own part in whatever's happening and what part you can control. So I love that. I love what you shared this morning. For those of you who have maybe don't necessarily follow Sarah Johnson or don't know of her work, she is an amazing leader, amazing educator, amazing mom and wife and a friend. And she does have a couple books out. One was the first one from with Dave Burgess, right? Or actually both of them with DBC, right? Balance Like a Pirate. No, not the second one. Okay.
Yeah.
But DBC was, right, with Balance Like a Pirate. And then your second one, Lead with Faith. So I actually have the copy right here.
Oh, that cover's so beautiful.
And it is beautiful. So if you have an opportunity to pick that up. But thank you again, Sarah, for your thoughts this morning. And probably the biggest takeaway from all of this is I have a feeling when we get off this, I think Joe is going to take his Merchant of Nope hoodie sweatshirt and say, maybe I need to refine myself. Maybe I do want to be a Merchant of Hope now after listening to
No, I don't. Sell hope. Why would I want to sell hope? That's ridiculous. We sell it? I'm no merchant. Like, what am I doing here? What are we really doing here? So we started the show with me talking about bathroom stuff, and Sarah Johnson brings in like 9 different research areas. I mean, seriously, what's really happening here? So, but at the same time, somehow it works. And we appreciate everybody being part of the conversation. We love doing this. And for all the people that follow along and have a good time with it, we just want to say thank you, because we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we take the work very seriously. And to have Sarah come on and talk about the research piece of what goes on and how we can help build resiliency is honestly something that I didn't know we were in for today, to be really honest. So I appreciate what you said, Sarah, in terms of bringing in all of the research and the connections. And like, I learned a ton today too. So I appreciate that. I know Jimmy does. And if there's anything that we can do for the listeners that you need, please let us know and reach out and help we can. But if you get back to how we started, figure out what your core set of values are and how you can start having the conversations. Because when you get to that part where you're wrestling with it, where you're in that struggle that Sarah's talking about, the struggle is not going to be as deep if you start from a core value set where you know where your edges are and you can continue to move forward. So Jimmy, why don't you take us out, my man? Thanks so much for having us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for helping me become maybe just a little bit smarter today. I know that's a challenge. It was for my teachers. Certainly it is. But hey, we hope you join us again next week. Joe and I will be back next week again. If you enjoyed the episode, we appreciate if you like, if you follow, if you share it with your friends and colleagues. And just thank you so much for pouring into us as well. We really appreciate it. God bless everyone. And until next week, be a merchant of hope. See you, Joe.
Of course.